Be talking about my home landscape. I've lived here a year and a half, and most of what you see is brand new this summer. What I did was for one thing, I didn't mow. I let the grass dry. I did control the height a little bit with a weed eater, but then after that, I just brought in a lot of organic matter. But this is about capturing rainwater. And to me, especially in a home landscape, the three things to be conscious of if you want to capture rainwater are the green plants, the brown organic matter, and the black soil. So how to capture rainwater: bring in the brown, meaning the wood chips and the leaves, the limbs, the logs. Grow the green. Let the plants grow. Don't be too obsessive about cutting or mowing. And then nurture the black. The black means the soil. So the soil is going to be increasingly carbon rich if we nurture the soil. And that's what makes it, gives it a black color. So plants, soil, and organic matter. Bring in the brown organic matter, let the plants grow, and then nurture the black soil. Organic matter is, by definition, it's anything that was once living. It's not living anymore. It might have living things in it, but wood, leaves, limbs, logs, wood chips, plants. Let the green plants grow. We're obsessed with mowing, and culturally, we need to kind of lose our obsession with mowing, I think. If we have to make everything neat and clean, then we're eliminating the plants. Soil is going to get increasingly rich over time. Good soil is porous, and it captures a whole lot of rainwater. So let's look at just a series of pictures and talk about the brown matter, the green matter, and the black soil. So this right in the back of the picture is my wood chip pile. You can get, at least in my area, you can get free wood chips, chipdrop.com. It takes about 20 minutes to fill out a form. And so this is my second pile. This is 1/8 of an acre. And I went through a whole pile of wood chips and then started another one. This is a path up and down here. This path of wood chips that absorbs rainwater. Right along the sides are long pile of brush piles, logs, limbs, leaves, and then on this side also. So that's going to capture rainwater when it comes down. It also gives a place for plants to grow, because because it holds more water, and also it's going to nurture the soil because there are living things in the soil that thrive on decomposing organic matter, decomposing wood. This is another angle on the same thing. Lots of green matter here is allowed to grow instead of mowing. This has never been mowed. Here's my front yard. I wanted to show you this because this was a yard last year, and now it's a garden. What I did is I never tilled it. I never plowed it. I just put wood chips on top of the grass, and then I planted the plants into the wood chips. The wood chips serve as weed control, and also they capture water. We had very little rain in June and July, but it was always wet underneath the wood chips. So the wood chips hold in the water. They capture the rain, they hold the water, and then that water is available for plants to grow. This is another angle on my front yard. Now, this was a lawn last year. Most of these plants are free from plant swaps. This is a ironweed right here. This is Joe Pye weed. Here's some brown-eyed Susans under here. Here's a Maximilian sunflower. And then this is the squash. I'll show you my squash in the back. But this is organic matter down here. This is wood chips. I put down the wood chips first, and then I planted into the wood chips. We got a little bit of Bermuda grass growing under here, but I'm not too concerned about it because it can only do so much with the wood chips and all the shade that's being cast. But So the plants are capturing the rain when it comes down. The organic matter is capturing the rain and holding on to it. And then all of this is nurturing good soil underneath. This is a leaf of a squash. I noticed I've noticed that this leaf is designed to capture rainwater, and then the rainwater flows into this little place here, and then it flows down the stem. So leaves capture rainwater. Every leaf is a solar panel. Every leaf is a solar powered air conditioner. There's lots of water transpiring from this leaf because the rain comes down and then it soaks into the ground, and then it comes up through the roots, up through the stems, transpires out through the leaves. That's all an air conditioning process. This is the front yard earlier in the year. Now, I had already put down the wood chips and like, oh no, all these weeds. Well, these weeds are violets. They're a native plant. They are an important host plant for butterflies, especially the fritillary butterflies need violets. And a traditional gardener would feel compelled to weed these out. I don't, because so here's my purple coneflowers. I planted those, I wanted those, but then, all these weeds, but I'm not gonna pull them out for a couple of reasons. One is that they capture rainfall, they cast shade, all plants are in the process of exuding carbon through their roots and thereby building soil that way, attracting a whole soil food web. So I don't see a weed as a nuisance or something to be rid of. I see a weed as these are not weeds, they're plants, they're a resource. There's much more cooperation going on here and not so much competition. Here's another angle on my front yard. All these plants are able to capture rainwater. The rain soaks into the ground. They're exuding carbon in the form of sugars through their roots. When they exude carbon, they attract a soil food web. It's like the bacteria come running because it's like cake and cookies. Let's have a party, all this sugar. And the bacteria and the fungi form the basis of the soil food web. The soil food web has all these animals that are making tunnels, and the ground becomes porous and carbon rich when we do that. This picture features my squash. Now, all this squash here is from 10 seeds. I couldn't believe how easy it was to grow squash. 10 seeds, and they've taken over. And lots of green matter. The wood chips underneath provide weed control and moisture retention. But I think this squash would grow anywhere. I encourage anybody to grow squash. It's so easy, and it's lots of green matter. It's going to provide lots of food, and it's going to cast shade to shade out some of the weeds. And notice how here's squash for food, and here's pretty wildflowers. These are brown-eyed Susans. So, lots of cooperation. This is a sponge. This is a place to capture rainwater. Here's another angle on the same thing. Squash, brown-eyed Susans, Maximilian sunflower, white snakeroot, crownbeard, yellow crownbeard, and Joe Pye weed over here. And underneath it is the brown, the wood chips that capture rainwater and control weeds and provide the basis for the soil food web. There's another angle. Ironweed, purple coneflowers, squash. I didn't plant the squash up here. It just came running. I planted the squash back there, and it's like, woo, everywhere. Green plants everywhere, exuding carbon into the ground, making the soil a sponge to capture rainwater. So that's about it. How to capture rainwater, bring in the brown, grow the green, nurture the black. Organic matter, bring in the brown organic matter, leaves, limbs, logs, wood chips. Plants, let the plants grow. Don't be so obsessed with cutting back plants. Don't be so obsessed with cutting. Try to make it look nice if you can, but we need plants. Plants are, every leaf is a solar powered air conditioner. Every plant has roots that exude carbon into the ground, jumpstart the soil food web, and make the soil porous and carbon rich, lots of soil organic matter. Soil, 5 principles of soil health. Don't till the soil. Don't put on chemical fertilizers. Don't use biocides. Do cover the ground with organic matter. Do let living roots occupy the ground. And do somehow involve animals. Usually in a home landscape, that means compost, because which is another conversation. But those are the 5 or 6 principles of soil health. Bring in the brown, let the green plants grow, nurture the black soil. That's it. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Hart. And I like how you always have some nice sayings, like this time with the brown, the black, and the green. Did you come up with that?
Probably borrowed some of it from elsewhere.
Cool. Yeah, so these are some simple techniques to capture the rainfall. And really, that's one of the most important things we can do in terms of restoring the water cycle, because what happens is that all over the world, our groundwater is depleting. And so if you have soil can be high quality or low quality. Low quality absorbs a lot less rainwater. And so when it does absorb more of the water, we replenish the groundwater, and that helps because a lot of counties right now are using groundwater as a way of one of the sources of local water. And the problem with a lot of places is that often, at least definitely in the US, like the water goes into storm drains and it just rushes out to the ocean. So that means we're having a lot less water on the continent. It's constantly draining out. Instead of, as it used to be, you didn't used to have storm drains and all this like river channels that funnel water faster out back into the ocean. We used to have a lot more nature, and so that naturally replenished groundwater. But now that function is disappearing. So it's really important to create this soil and kind of make our gardens a lot more rainwater capturers. And the other thing that's really important is that when it does capture that rainwater, it evapotranspires back. And so water's flowing out of the continent, but that means water must constantly be flowing inland too, through the air and atmospheric vapor. And it's not all just coming from the ocean, it also comes from the water evapotranspiring from our gardens and then blows back further inland. That's creating the rain. So we need our gardens both to capture the rain, to replenish the groundwater, and also to feed the atmospheric vapor to create more rain. So I think it's important in our local communities to kind of get a neighborhood movement going, to kind of talk to your neighbors why it's important to improve the soil and grow the plants and the brown, the green, and the black to kind of create more rainwater capturing. Bunny, you have a question? I see your hand raised.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering how this what Hart just presented might change a little bit if you're not in such an urban area like we're not. If you have more land that has already been taken over by native plants and native flowers. So we're on a steep slope out here. We have 1.5 acres, and this land has definitely been disturbed a lot in the past 10 years. And so we have those pioneer species. And so I'm thinking, like, would I, number one, to come in with a lot of wood chips on large amounts of land would just be a huge undertaking. But additionally, I'm like, would that actually be better than leaving the native grasses and the native flowers that attract the pollinators and whatnot? Yeah, I hope that is a clear enough question.
Yeah, well, a couple of issues. One is slope, and the other is a mix of brown and green. Another issue is how many people do you have per acre? So I have one person for an eighth of an acre, and I enjoy spending time out there. I can put in a fair amount of labor per acre, and it doesn't seem like work. Um, so as far as slope, yeah, I have no slope. I have, yeah, so it's good. It's flat, and I don't have to worry about earthworks, about, you know, putting obstacles in the way of water going downhill. The more slope you have, the quicker the water is going to run off, and you have to, you know, use swales and check dams and things like that to put, you know, go outside when it's raining and where's the water flowing, and wherever the most water is flowing, think about putting some obstacle in the way of the water flowing downhill. Another issue is ground. It's like the organic matter versus the plants. There's a little bit of a trade-off between the two. I like to mix the two. I like to have some brown to hold in the water, and some, you know, but I don't want so much brown that that you can't have any green plants growing up through that. So, you know, in your case, with more land and with native wildflowers already growing, I would not be putting too much time and labor into bringing in organic matter, although it really depends on how much can you get for free, how much is it going to cost you in terms of money, how much is it going to cost you in terms of labor. You know, we all have limited amounts of time, limited amounts of money. So if you can get somebody to bring in free logs and stuff like that, and you can put them on contour, then that can prevent some of the runoff. It can slow the progress of water running downhill. We don't have to stop water. We just have to slow it down. This is what Peter Gabris told me. He's one of the Eastern Europeans that works with Michael Kravchuk. But, you know, if you go outside, see where it's raining, or see what's happening, see where water's flowing when it's raining, and then think about, you know, how can I put obstacles in the way of that water? So I hope that helped. But back to the green and the brown. I mean, I see the organic matter helps the plants. You don't want to cover up the plants with the organic matter, but if you have some organic matter helping to absorb the water when it rains, then to me that helps plants. I mean, I see people without any mulch at all, and I think, you know, the rain is going to come and it's going to go and it's going to evaporate. That because, you know, when rain comes down, it can go three directions. It can go down into the ground, or it can go up into the air and evaporate, or it can go sideways. So, you know, if there's no organic matter on the ground, then it seems to me like much of that water is going to evaporate, assuming it doesn't sink into the soil. So, you know, you said your land has been disturbed. The soil is probably not real high quality. So the soil itself is probably not going to soak in very much water. So that, but if you have in places where you don't have too much slope, and you can have some organic matter there, then that's going to hold in the water, and it's just going to make the water available to the plants even during relatively long dry spells. So hope that helps.
I just want to clarify, Hart said two words, swales and check dams, which everyone may not know. So swales is kind of like a little ditch that's along the contour. So as the water runs downhill, if you have a downhill land, then it'll capture some of that rainwater. And then also check dams can be little rocks you place in the path of the rainfall to kind of capture that rainfall. So it slows it down and will sink downward. And then just to throw in two other things you could do with the soil is you can do compost teas if you have a larger piece of land. And also certain mycelial, you can make mycelial compost teas, because if you guys have heard of Elaine Ingram, she's a soil scientist. She really talks about the soil biology, focusing on the bacteria, the nematodes, the mycelia growing, because they're the ones creating the soil from the carbon matter. And so if you can increase that, that will improve your soil. Cool.
And I want to echo what Alpha is saying, because what you're referring to is the biology in the soil. So Elaine Ingham and Matt Powers are saying that, you know, if you have good compost and you take the good compost and you make compost tea out of it, and then you spray the compost tea on the ground, and then that is going to kickstart your soil biology. And when you have more acreage and less people working on that acreage, then I think there's a tremendous opportunity to do a lot of good with just not too much time and effort. I think the trickiest part of that is to either make good compost or find good compost. Either make or find compost that is rich with soil life, rich with fungal, you know, many species of bacteria, many species of fungus, etc. So good compost tea is going to kickstart your soil biology, and that's going to absorb a whole lot of water. I like saying that it's not just plants that absorb water. It's not just soil that absorbs water. It is ecosystems that absorb water and carbon, because all living things are made out of a lot of water. All living things have water and carbon. So when you have an ecosystem that's growing, that's you know, it's growing in mass, it's growing in diversity, then that's going to absorb water. And it's a virtuous cycle. It's going to be a self-perpetuating virtuous cycle. The soil holds on to more water, grows more plants. The plants hold on to water and nurture the soil. And all of that nurtures the soil food web. The soil food web contains lots of living things that are made of water and carbon. It's a virtuous cycle.
Cool. Thank you. Poyom.
Yeah, thanks, Hart, for the presentation. There's a couple things I'd love to mention there, and then also to have a question for Bunny and some suggestions. I love that you included this green, brown, black. I really like that. And I think this piece of the conversation that's coming up now is kind of directly related and can be tied in a very nice way. You know, I've done teaching sort of people how to make compost, and it's the simplest way is kind of to talk about green and brown. And I think one thing that is critical that I think wasn't quite mentioned, but we're kind of talking around it, which I think is there, is yeah, we can bring stuff in to our yard, which is great. And yes, we shouldn't cut, you know, we shouldn't be so strict about mowing. But if you feel like you need to, you feel like you have to, and there's certain situations where, yes, you'll have to prune a tree or cut some things back because you want something else to grow. Don't get rid of that material. That's an opportunity to make compost. So if you have the energy or the ability to cut that up in some kind of fine way, and you can mix the green material and the brown material together, if you have enough of it, you can make compost. I mean, you can make compost regardless. The pile of wood chips sitting at the end of Hart's pathway will turn into compost all on its own. One of the simplest and most effective types of compost is what's called the Sue Johnson bioreactor. It's like just basically all you need is an open mesh cylinder, like some wire with some air, some tubes that allow air to come in there, and you can fill that with leaves. That'll turn into wonderful compost. Even just a pile of shredded leaves without the mesh and the air will turn into compost. And so I think just that important piece of the compost or the compost tea, because, you know, in order to make the compost tea, you kind of start with the compost. And yeah, Elaine and Matt Powers were both mentioned. they're doing amazing work on how to figure out if you're making the right compost. That's a little more complicated in terms of like measuring the bugs. And then Bunny, where did you say you were located?
Just outside of Austin, Texas. near
Right.
Lake
Right. So you probably do you get a lot of rain there?
Powell. It's sort of feast or famine. Like last
Right.
year, when we get it, we get a lot of
A
it. I
lot.
think it's like 30 inches a year or something. I don't remember.
Okay.
Right.
So that's not so different from us. Yeah, so I think what Hart said is like observing. It's really important. Seeing where the water's running off on your property. I just want to reiterate what he said, that's so important. And then as far as starting, wood chips are amazing. I'm like, Hart is right. Like, get as many as you can and just use them. Start near your house. Start with pathways. Places where you know that you can put them and it's going to be fine. Just start using them. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention, Hart talked about how he put the wood chips on his lawn and he used that to sort of kickstart this process that he's talking about. There's another thing that you can do. There's always more things that you can do, but something that's relatively simple is if you have a lawn or an area that's been compacted, heavily compacted, whether it was used as some place where people were walking or something like that, you can take like a spade fork, like a pitchfork kind of with the flat tines. And if you just work that into the soil, not turning the soil over, but just getting it down into the soil and sort of spreading a little bit to sort of open that soil up before you put your layers of brown or whatever you're going to put on top of that before you plant into it, that can help to sort of open up that compacted soil to give pathways, to make it a little bit easier for the microbes and the roots and everything to get down into that compacted soil. They will eventually if you don't, but it just is can kickstart it a little bit faster. So I just wanted to add that in for people if they weren't familiar with that.
Oh, thank you.